The question is, do you need to lose fat? Should you lose fat? Should you pursue fat loss? And the reason this is an important thing to consider is because it's often an assumption that, well, we should all just get leaner and obesity is a problem and being leaner is better and you're going to look better if you're leaner, etc., etc. And there's a good reason for that to be true for many people. But for many people, especially those that we tend to come across in our kind of corner of the health and fitness space, fat loss isn't necessarily what they need. And in some cases, it can make pre-existing problems worse. And the easy example of that would be someone who's been just perpetually dieting. You know, you've been dieting for what seems like forever. You might be on and off dieting for 5 or 10 years, and you're in this position where you're not totally happy with your body, but you know, if you were to ask anyone else, they'd say you look pretty lean, you're in decent shape, you mightn't have abs, but you know, by all standards, you're in pretty decent shape. And you still may feel like, well, I just need to get leaner, I just need to get leaner, I need to keep dieting. And there comes a point where that is just counterproductive, and it's actually holding you back from progressing in other domains, both specific to fitness and beyond fitness, such as your performance in the gym, such as setting athletic goals, whether that be, you know, running a 5K, running a 10K, playing a sport, squatting double body weight, or performance in other avenues, such as being a good parent. You know, it's very difficult to be a good parent or family member or colleague if all you're ever focused on is restricting your food, not eating out, eating from Tupperware, stressing over meal prep and stuff like that. It's very difficult to give attention to those things if you're constantly just dieting. And obviously then if you're constantly trying to diet and you're feeling crap about failed attempts at dieting and losing fat, then that can affect your psychological well-being and can then carry over into, you know, your mood, anxiety, poor body image, and then obviously poor performance in work and general life as a result of that. So fat loss isn't always what you need, but hopefully in this podcast we can clarify as to when it might be a good idea and when maybe you should take a foot off the gas.
Yeah, this is one of those things. Like I do all the consultation calls on all the consultation calls, but if someone's looking to sign up with us, right? Generally you'll be speaking to me first, right? And I could not tell you the amount of people that come to us looking for a specific goal that we effectively turn away because that goal isn't actually a good goal. Like that sounds real condescending, being like, oh, I'm here to dictate whether your goal is good or not, you know? But in reality, it's like what people are looking for, or what these people are looking for, it's not actually aligned with what they actually want, you know? And that sounds a bit weird because how can that be the case? But often people think that they want a certain thing, but it actually, in reality, is taking them away from what they actually want. And the way I always conceptualize this is, and we've talked about it before, there's effectively 3 goals with all this health and fitness stuff. Now, obviously, there's not just 3 goals with your entire life, but with all this health and fitness stuff, it can kind of be boiled back to you have health related goals, you have body composition related goals, and then you have performance related goals, right? And it's very rare that you're going to have someone that's like, oh, all I care about is the body composition goal, right? That's the only thing for me, right? Even the people that say, oh, like all I care about is, you know, getting lean or, you know, building muscle or doing whatever, most often they actually do have other goals in terms of, you know, they want to feel a certain way, they want to like be a health level or be at a health level that is, you know, congruent with the other goals that they have in their life. Like they want to be able to live to, you know, 90 rather than just like, oh, I looked great for 1 year when I was 25 and then I died. You know, like it's very rare that you're going to have someone to say that says that. Obviously those people do exist, you know, but it's rare, right? But the main thing you see is people chasing body composition goals at the expense of performance goals, which actually then hinders their body composition goals longer term, right? Like I will have, like I've gone through so many of these consultation calls where someone will come to me and they'll say, oh, I want to get leaner, I want to lose fat, I want to engage in a fat loss phase, but I don't have as much muscle as I want to actually look the way that I want overall, right? And then when you inquire a little bit deeper, you're like, okay, well, what have you been doing? How has the last few years looked? You come to realize that a lot of people are in this perpetual state of dieting, this perpetual state of fat loss. And there's a few things that go on here. It's, first of all, people try to lose fat and then never actually succeed in getting as lean as they want. And this is one thing that we need to address on this podcast, which is, realistic body composition levels, right? So we'll keep that in our heads for later. But people will also basically be on this merry-go-round of, I tried a fat loss diet, and then, I got a certain level of leanness, we'll call them side effects, became too prominent, and I had to, increase calories again, or maybe I started binge eating or whatever, something else happens. And then as a result of that, they then end up with more body fat, or they end up not actually able to maintain the level of leanness that they had. And this is very frequent, very common, where you see people going like, I want to basically build more muscle over time, and I know to do that, I'm going to need to eat more. But what often happens is, and it's generally good advice, it's like most people say, get leaner first. So you start from a more insulin sensitive position. You start from a position where you're actually able to see your muscles, et cetera, et cetera. But what people do is they aggressively diet to get lean, and then they try to increase their calories. But because fat loss isn't exactly, fat gain isn't exactly easy to see initially, like obviously you're going to see a little bit of blurring of the lines or whatever, but you can actually gain quite a lot of fat without visually gaining quite a lot of fat when you're very lean, right? And this is, again, we'll come back to realistic body composition standards and stuff in a second. But what often happens is people end up eating more and more and more. They're like, I'm actually not gaining any fat. I'm in a great position. I'm building lots of muscle. When in reality, they're probably not building that much muscle. They are actually gaining fat. It's just in less obvious places, right? And then they end up in a thing where, 3 months after the end of their diet, they have actually gained like 20 pounds or 10 kilos, and 9 kilos of that was fat, right? So they end up in this stage where then they can never actually commit to a full, we'll call it a lean gain phase, or a bulking phase, or a gaining phase, whatever terminology you want to use, because now they're in a position where they're uncomfortable with their body. They're in a position where they have effectively set themselves up to want to, or to start thinking about engaging in another fat loss phase, right? And this is the fitness industry 101. This is the vast majority of people will do this. They'll diet down, maybe they don't get as lean as they want to do, and then they'll start gaining. They gain too aggressively, and then they end up in a position where they have too much fat for their own liking, and then they actually start dieting again, and we start this vicious cycle back and forth, this yo-yo up and down and up and down. And obviously that's not conducive to long-term progress. That's not conducive to you being in a position in 5 years' time where you're like, wow, I've actually spent 5 years in a gaining phase where I didn't gain that much fat. Obviously, we'll say even if it's 50-50 fat to muscle gain, like if you're able to stay in a surplus for longer, you're going to be the one that builds more muscle. That's just the simple case of it, right? So we want to actually set up fat loss correctly from the start. However, to do that, we actually need to take a step back and assess whether fat loss is correct for you right now, right? Because the thing that might be correct for you right now versus the thing that might be correct for you over the longer term, they might not align. So we actually have to set some like goals ahead of time, right? And while fat loss might be a goal, that doesn't mean that necessarily needs to be the goal right now, right? And that is something that you need to be aware of. Like you might want to lose some body fat, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it right now. So we need to be very clear on that. And there's especially obviously a few cases that just come to mind. Like it's very big in the fitness industry nowadays to talk about like people's relationship with food, and then the relationship with themselves. Like if you think losing fat is going to solve your relationship with food, or it's going to solve your relationship with your body and your like body image overall, like you're deluded, right? It's just not going to be the case. Like while it might help for some people, like there's always going to be people that certain interventions help. For the vast majority of people, if you hate your body and you have this like, all or nothing, binge restrict cycle mentality around food, eating a calorie deficit is not going to solve that. So we need to be very aware and very clear on our overall goals with what we're actually trying to achieve with the diet, rather than just going like, in the health and fitness industry, being lean is seen as a good thing, so I'm just going to lean out, like, or I'm going to diet down so that I lose some fat. Like, this is not necessarily a good goal for you overall.